B. Wordsworth by V.S. Naipaul. Three beggars called punctually every day at the hospitable houses in Miguel Street. So please remember the story is set in Miguel Street, which is a poverty-stricken town or a street in West Indies. So the story is set in West Indies. At about 10, means 10 o'clock in the morning, an Indian came. Indian here means a red Indian, like a native Indian, somebody who is native to America, not a white man, a native to America. He came in his dhoti and white jacket, and we poured a tin of rice into the sack he carried on his back. At 12, an old woman smoking a pipe came and she got a cent. At 2, a blind man led by a boy called for his penny. Sometimes we had a rogue. Rogue means a petty thief, chota mota chor, a petty thief. One day a man called and said he was hungry. We gave him a meal. He asked for a cigarette and wouldn't go until we had lit it for him. That man never came again. Now, in the first two paragraphs, what we find is that the narrator or the narrator boy, even though he comes from a very humble background, even though he is from a very poor background, but they are hospitable people. We get 4 to 5 examples here. At 10 o'clock, an Indian came and they gave him a tin of rice. At 12 o'clock, an old woman came smoking and they gave her a cent. At 2 o'clock, a blind man came who was led by a boy. They gave him a penny. Okay. Now the author also says, the narrator also says that these three beggars, they called punctually every day. So it is like a routine. And yet these people give them rice and money. So they are hospitable people because they understand what is poverty. They help the poor, even though they themselves are poor. तो कहीं ना कहीं यहाँ पे वीएस नाइपॉल एक ब्लैक ह्यूमर या सटायर क्रिएट कर रहा है व्हेन ही इज ट्राइंग टू सजेस्ट दैट सबसे बड़े दानवीर गरीब लोग होते हैं. पुअर पीपल आर द ones who are truly charitable because they understand the other person's pain. So write down question number 1. How can you say that the narrator and his mother were hospitable people, despite being poor themselves? In brackets, write down 3 marks. So according to 3 marks, you frame an answer based on the first 2 paragraphs. Okay. Third para, follow the book. The strangest caller came one afternoon at about 4 o'clock. I had come back from school and was in my home clothes. The man said to me, Sonny is like dear, may I come inside your yard? He was a small man and he was tidily dressed. He wore a hat, a white shirt and black trousers. I asked, what do you want? He said, I want to watch your bees. We had 4 small gru palm trees and they were full of uninvited bees. I ran up the steps and shouted, Ma, it have a man outside here. He say he want to watch the bees. My mother came out, looked at the man and asked in an unfriendly way, what do you want? The man said, I want to watch your bees. Question number 2. Question number 2. Why does the narrator feel that B. Wordsworth was the strangest caller? Why does the narrator feel that B. Wordsworth was the strangest caller?
So strangest caller.
Caller, yes. Strangest को double quotes में लिखो. Again, you can put 3 marks here. 2 to 3. तो इसका आंसर क्या लिखोगे? You will write that everybody who called at their house either wanted money or food like rice or pipe or cigarette. But this man, B. Wordsworth, he did not ask for anything material. Try to understand the difference. Because he was a poet, he was not interested in material things. So he did not ask for money or food grains or cigarette or pipe. He was asking for a share of nature. He wanted to watch the bees that grew in their backyard. And that is why the narrator boy finds this caller to be of the strangest kind. Okay, so this is the answer you will write. Go to page number 117. His English was so good, it didn't sound natural. And I could see my mother was worried. She said to me, "Stay here and watch him while he watched the bees." The man said, "Thank you, madam. You have done a good deed today." He spoke very slowly and very correctly, as though every word was costing him money. We watched the bees, this man and I, for about an hour, squatting, which means sitting down, near the palm trees. The man said, "I like watching bees. Sonny, do you like watching bees?" I said, "I ain't have the time." Now, what we find here, the first line is very important. His English was so good, it didn't sound natural. And I could see my mother was worried. Question number 3. Question number 3. Why was the narrator's mother worried? Why was the narrator's mother worried when she heard B. Wordsworth speak? When she heard B. Wordsworth speak? Question mark. 2 marks. Okay, put there 2 marks. So what will you write here? You will write these 2 points, that the narrator's mother was worried because B. Wordsworth's English was grammatically correct and very good. It was very well framed. It worried her because it made him an outcast, or it made him different from their kind. Okay, because the narrator and his mother, they were semi-educated, they were poor, and they were not very fluent in English. They made grammatical errors and their English was broken English, or like wrongly structured sentences. But he had poetic qualities, he had correct English, which sounded unnatural to them, because the poet and it told his mother that this man, this poet does not belong to one of us. So his accuracy and precision in English isolated him from the group of people who lived in Miguel Street. Okay, that is why his mother was worried. Okay, go back to the book. I said I ain't have the time. He shook his head sadly. He said, that's what I do. I just watch. I can watch ants for days. Have you ever watched ants and scorpions and centipedes and congories? Congoree is like a centipede, I think. It is an insect. Have you watched those? I shook my head. Now, this may sound a bit abnormal that a man is coming and asking the boy, have you seen ants? I can watch ants for days and days. It is this abnormality of this man, B. Wordsworth, that makes him count as a poet. Poets are abnormal in the sense that they do all those things which ordinary people do not do. And that is why they isolate themselves from the mainstream society. Also, the fact that the poet is far more interested in animals and insects and bees and trees, this fact tells us that he is interested in every element of nature, in every aspect of nature, but he is indifferent to material comforts of our lives. He is indifferent about job, money, career, or other mundane things of life, other everyday things of life. I shook my head. I said, what you does do, mister? He got up and said, I am a poet. I said, a good poet. He said, the greatest in the world. What your name, mister? B. Wordsworth. B for Bill. Black. Black Wordsworth. White Wordsworth was my brother. We share one heart. I can watch a small flower like the morning glory and cry. So he informs that he is called Black Wordsworth, and he also informs that White Wordsworth, which is William Wordsworth, the poet of Daffodils that you had got in ICSE. So he says that I am the brother of the White Wordsworth, and we both are poets. We share one heart. This brings us to question number 4. 4, I think. So write down. Why does B. Wordsworth call himself the brother of White Wordsworth? Why does B. Wordsworth call himself the brother of White Wordsworth? Question mark? 2 marks. 2 to 3. So what will you write here? You will write that B. Wordsworth was obviously not the biological brother of William Wordsworth, who was the English poet, and he was white because he was white in color. He was racially white. He cannot be the biological brother of White Wordsworth because William Wordsworth came much before his time. William Wordsworth आज से like around 200 years पहले आया था. So William Wordsworth came much before his time. So he was not biologically his brother. But B. Wordsworth is trying to suggest that they are brothers in the sense that they are both poets. They belong to the same community. They share the same sentiment. When he says that we share one heart, he means to say that they have similar poetic sentiments, and they both think alike. They both are made from the same clay. They are both uninterested in material and mundane things of life. They both are interested in nature and in the poetic flavor, in the poetic uh, component of life. Okay, this you write. In fact, अगर इसको और भी justify करना है, तो as you know that William Wordsworth, he was a nature poet. So all his poems, most of his poems revolve around nature. For example, the daffodils revolves around the yellow flower. And here he says that I can watch a small flower like the morning glory and cry. So he himself says that I too can cry over a flower, which means I can vent out my emotions. I can become sentimental about a flower, which is only possible for a poet. For example, William Wordsworth had got sentimental over daffodils, and he remembered the flower, that daffodil, the daffodils, a bunch of flowers for years and years, because he was a poet. Only poets can cry over or laugh over or delight over flowers. Ordinary people who do not have poetic sentiments, they do not remember flowers for years and years. Understood? Go to page 118. Why, boy? Why? You will know when you grow up. You are a poet too, you know. And when you are a poet, you can cry for everything. I couldn't laugh. He said, you like your mother? When she is not beating me. He pulled out a printed sheet from his hip pocket. Hip pocket means the back pocket of the trouser or jeans. We are assuming that he is not wearing jeans, he is wearing trousers. So he pulled out a printed sheet from his hip pocket and said, on this paper is the greatest poem about mothers, and I am going to sell it to you at a bargain price for 4 cents. तो वो पोएम निकालता है और कहता है, it is a poem about mothers and you can buy it for a dirt cheap price of 4 cents. I went inside and I said, Ma, you want to buy a poetry for only 4 cents? My mother said, tell that blasted man to haul his tail, means to lift his tail, away from my yard. You hear? So this tone of the mother is the tone of anger. She is being offensive because she is insecure about him. He is not a beggar. He is not a poor person. Or even if he is poor, he is pretending to be sophisticated. His educated and sophisticated personality is what is worrying the mother. I said to B. Wordsworth, my mother says she ain't have 4 cents. B. Wordsworth said, it is the poet's tragedy. And he put the paper back in his pocket. He didn't seem to mind. Write down the next question. What, according to B. Wordsworth, according to B. Wordsworth, is the poet's tragedy? Question mark. 2 marks. So here, what answer can you write? Here you can write that Mm, when B. Wordsworth uh, presented one of his poems about mothers to the boy and offered it as sale and offered it for sale for only 4 cents, the boy could not buy it. His mother vehemently or violently refused to part with 4 cents and spoke about B. Wordsworth in a derogatory manner. Derogatory. Spoke about B. Wordsworth in a derogatory manner, which means disrespectful manner. His full stop, his inability to sell his poem is what he calls as the poet's tragedy. His inability to sell his poem is what he calls as the poet's tragedy. This answer you right. So basically, B. Wordsworth is trying to suggest that poets are artistically very rich, but they can never be rich in money because ordinary people never appreciate their art. Ordinary people never give their money to a poet because they never give importance to poets. And that is the tragedy and that is the irony of a poet's life, that a poet is the greatest human on earth. The poet is a visionary, the poet has magic, the poet has art, yet people never appreciate the poet's artistic qualities. Okay, go back to the book. And he put the paper back in his pocket. He didn't seem to mind. I said, is a funny way to go around selling poetry like that. Only Calypsonians do that sort of thing. A lot of people does buy. So the boy is saying that Calypsonians do that. Now Calypsonia or Calypsonian, if you find it on YouTube, you will find that Calypsonia एक song होता है, which is like a local West Indian song, which people sing there in the season of Calypsonia, in the Calypsonian season. So these people sell their poetry or they sing their songs as they travel. So the boy says that only Calypsonians do that sort of thing. And he asks that if a lot of people buy your poems, he said, no one has yet bought a single copy. But why you does keep on going around then? He said, in this way I watch many things, and I always hope to meet poets. I said, you really think I is a poet? You are as good as me, he said. And when B. Wordsworth left, I prayed I would see him again. So what we find here is that uh, the boy is greatly impressed by the carefree attitude of B. Wordsworth. The boy who is at an impressionable age, means he is at an age when he can be influenced. This is the difference between the boy and the mother. The mother is an adult. She cannot be influenced. But the boy is very young, and the boy can be influenced by the words or by the philosophy of B. Wordsworth. And the boy here is getting influenced. He is beginning to like the poet. And therefore he says that I pray I would see him again. About a week later, coming back from school one afternoon, I met him at the corner of Miguel Street. So once again, uh, after 1 week, the boy met him again. Go to page number 119. He said, I have been waiting for you for a long time. I said, you sell any poetry yet? He shook his head. He said, in my yard, I have the best mango tree in Port of Spain. Port of Spain is the name of a place. And now the mangoes are ripe and red and very sweet and juicy. I have waited here for you to tell you this and to invite you to come and eat some of my mangoes. So now the boy will go to B. Wordsworth's house. He lived in Alberto Street in a one-roomed hut placed right in center of the lot. The yard seemed all green. There was the big mango tree. There was a coconut tree and there was a plum tree. The place looked wild as though it wasn't in the city at all. You couldn't see all the big concrete houses in the street. He was right. The mangoes were sweet and juicy. I ate about six, and the yellow mango juice ran down my arms to my elbows and down my mouth to my chin, and my shirt was stained. My mother said when I was home, "Where you was? You think you is a man now and could go all over the place. Go cut a whip for me." So his mother was very angry, and his mother asked him to bring a whip, and she whipped him. She beat him. She beat me rather badly, and I ran out of the house, swearing that I would never come back. I went to B. Wordsworth's house. I was so angry. My nose was bleeding. B. Wordsworth said, "Stop crying, and we will go for a walk." I stopped crying, but I was breathing short. We went for a walk. We walked down St. Clair Avenue to the savannah. Savannah means open grassland of America. It is basically a huge open grassland. So we went to the savannah and we walked to the race course. B. Wordsworth said, "Now let us lie on the grass and look up at the sky, and I want you to think how far those stars are from us." Now, once again, you notice that B. Wordsworth's tendency is to go away from the center of the city, to go away from the humdrum and the chaos of the city. He took the boy to a grassland, which is obviously cut off from the main traffic of the city. And there also, he wants the boy to lie down and to concentrate on the stars which are far away from our planet. So to focus on the star means to mentally leave the planet Earth and to imagine yourself on the other side of the universe or on the other side of the space. So once again, the poet has this tendency to escape from the harsher realities of life, to escape the harsher and the mundane realities of life, and to go away to some other part of the world or other part of space. Now, this tendency we find in a few other poets also. For example, in the poem Birches, we had noticed that Robert Frost has this tendency, or he has this yearning to escape from the mundane earth, even if it is for a short time. He wanted to climb the birch tree and to escape. So this is called escapism. Escapism is something which is common to most poets. So most poets have this common character of escapism, which is a tendency to escape either permanently or temporarily the usual chaos and confusion of life. So looking at the stars for hours and hours indicates escapism. Go to page number 120. One minute. I did as he told me, and I saw what he meant. I felt like nothing, and at the same time, I had never felt so big and great in all my life. I forgot all my anger and all my tears and all the blows. So here you can see that the boy, when he got lost in the stars and in the Milky Way, then the boy also felt this thrill of escapism, because you become like vacuum from inside. You lose all interest, you leave behind all relations on earth. So the boy also began to float in the air. He left behind his anger on his mother or his frustration with his poor life. He felt that he had never been so big and so happy before. When I said I was better, he began telling me the names of the stars, and I particularly remembered the constellation of Orion the Hunter, though I don't really know why. I can spot Orion even today, but I have forgotten the rest. Now, this line tells us that the boy now is a grown up boy. He is now a grown up man, and he is writing this as a as a part of his autobiography. He's writing this autobiographical account, trying to recall uh, a chapter of his childhood. Then a light was flashed in our faces, and we saw a policeman. We got up from the grass. The policeman said, "What are you doing here?" B. Wordsworth said, "I have been asking myself the same question for 40 years. Now, this again, here B. Wordsworth is trying to offer this philosophy that uh, life is meaningless and there has to be a purpose which is much higher than just trying to feed ourselves and our children. So, B. Wordsworth does not know what is his purpose in life. And he says, I have been asking myself the same question for 40 years, that why am I here? What am I doing on earth? Or what am I doing with my life? So this kind of a carefree, philosophical, isolated, self-absorbed character of B. Wordsworth is a very typical character of an average poet, lost in his or her own thoughts and completely unconcerned about what is going on around you. We became friends, B. Wordsworth and I. He told me, "You must never tell anybody about me and about the mango tree and the coconut tree and the plum tree. You must keep that a secret. If you tell anybody, I will know because I am a poet." I gave him my word and I kept it. Next question. Write down. Why does B. Wordsworth say? Why does B. Wordsworth say that he will know because he is a poet? Why does B. Wordsworth say that he will know because he is a poet? So in the answer, you will write down that B. Wordsworth takes immense pride in being a poet. He believes that he is a visionary and he has complete knowledge and a lot more wisdom than common people. He realizes that poets are underappreciated by the society or frowned upon or looked down upon by the society. Yet, yet he does not wish to lead his life with a bowed head. He tells Sonny, he tells the boy that being a poet, he is omniscient. Okay, omniscient means one who knows everything. OMNISCIENT, omniscient. Okay, go back to the book. I gave him my word and I kept it. I liked his little room. It had no more furniture than George's front room. George is probably somebody whom the boy knows, like a cleaner or a servant, maybe. But it looked cleaner and healthier, but it also looked lonely. Write down one more question. Compare and contrast. Compare and contrast B. Wordsworth's house from the inside and from the outside. Compare and contrast B. Wordsworth's house from the inside and from the outside. 3 marks, 3 to 4. Now here you can write that, B. Wordsworth's house from inside lacked material things. It hardly had any furniture. It was a tiny room. It was clean, hygienic, but almost vacant. And it had a feeling of loneliness and gloom around it, about it. On the other hand, on the outside, there was a garden which was full of mango trees, plum tree, and so on. So this probably, this is a contrast between the inside of the house and the outside of the house. In a way, it also depicts the poet's own life. From the outside, the poet may appear to be sophisticated, well versed in English, and someone who is a respectful, or someone who is an educated uh, person of the society. But deep inside, B. Wordsworth, like any other poet, is lonely, sad, and troubled. This answer you write down. Okay, go back to
Sir,
the book.
on the outside में सिर्फ trees के बारे में लिखना है.
You can write about the description of the describe the garden, the greenery. Means try to say that outside, the outside part of the house is more appealing, while the inside part of the house is sort of very gloomy and lonely. In a way, it is also a reflection of the poet's life. कि अंदर ही अंदर, अपने अंदर, पोएट के अंदर कितने दुख भरे हैं, कितना लोनलीनेस है, वो में दिखाई नहीं देता. लेकिन बाहर ही बाहर अगर देखोगे तो पोएट का लाइफ लगता है कि पोएट काफी हैप्पी है, काफी चीयरफुल है, हर जगह वो चीयरफुलनेस फैला रहा है. He is trying to be happy, he is writing poems, he seems to be carefree, he seems to have no worry in the world. But deep inside, if you try to peep inside his heart, then he is a troubled person. He has so many sad stories which he tries to hide inside his heart. Just like his room, which is vacant, hollow, but sad. Okay. Go back to page number 120. One day I asked him, Mr. Wordsworth, why you does keep all this bush in your yard? And it does make the place damp? He said, listen and I will tell you a story. Once upon a time, a boy and a girl met each other and they fell in love. They loved each other so much they got married. So here there is a feeling that B. Wordsworth is telling his own story, that he had married someone. They were both poets. He loved words. She loved grass and flowers and trees. They lived happily in a single room, and then one day the girl poet said to the boy poet, we are going to have another poet in the family. But this poet or this child was never born because the girl died and the young poet died with her inside her. So this probably is the backstory of B. Wordsworth, which he tries to tell the boy, the young boy, in a subtle or in an indirect manner. And this also is probably the basis of his sadness, which he tries to cover through his cheerful facade. So through his cheerful face, he tries to cover this sadness that is a part of his life and heart. Page number 121. And the girl's husband was very sad, and he said he would never touch a thing in the girl's garden. And so the garden remained and grew high and wild. I looked at B. Wordsworth, and as he told me this lovely story, he seemed to grow older. I understood his story. So the boy also realizes that B. Wordsworth probably is the young man. He is the husband in the story. And as he said this, he grew old, means he grew sadder. His face seemed to turn sad, and therefore he looked older. We went for long walks together. We went to the botanical gardens and the rock gardens. We climbed Chancellor Hill in the late afternoon and watched the darkness fall on Port of Spain and watched the lights go on in the city and on the ships in the harbor. He did everything as though he were doing it for the first time in his life. He did everything as though he were doing some church rite. So this tells us that B. Wordsworth took keen interest in small things of life, like taking a walk, watching the stars, going to the botanical garden where he has gone several times. So he performs all these visits as if he is doing a church rite, being very, very thorough about it, not doing it casually. He would say to me, "Now, how about having some ice cream?" And when I said yes, he would grow very serious and say, "Now, which cafe shall we patronize?" Patronize means to honor. Which cafe shall we honor? और कहाँ पे हम पैसे दें अपने और उस कैफे को बड़ा करें, किस कैफे को हम इज्जतदार बनाएं. As though it were a very important thing, he would think for some time about it and finally say, "I think we will go and negotiate the purchase with that shop." Now, the irony here is that the poet believes that if they go to a cafe or to a shop, then that cafe or that shop will have the honor of hosting them. But he also understands that he has to go there and negotiate or bargain the price because both of them were poor. So it is a contradictory statement. The poet thinks that वो जिस कैफे में जाएगा उस कैफे का बहुत नाम हो जाएगा, वो कैफे बहुत ही लकी होगा कि वो पोएट आया है उसमें. लेकिन एट द सेम टाइम वो ये भी सोच रहा है कि वहां जाके मुझे बार्गेनिंग करना पड़ेगा कि वो मुझे इतने में देगा कि नहीं देगा. So it is like a clash of his idealism and the reality of life. दोनों में clash है. He thinks that the ideal world should be a world where poets are respected and honored. But जो real world है वो ये है कि उसमें उसे शॉपकीपर भगा देगा अगर उसके पास पैसे ना हो तो. So it is like a clash, a very sad conflict between idealism and reality. The world became a most exciting place. One day when I was in his yard, he said to me, "I have a great secret which I am now going to tell you." I said, "It really is secret?" At the moment, yes. I looked at him and he looked at me. He said, "This is just between you and me, remember. I am writing a poem." So he tells that this is his secret. He is writing a poem. Oh, I was disappointed. He said, "But this is a different sort of poem. This is the greatest poem in the world." I whistled. So once again, he says in a very uh, like important tone that he is writing the greatest poem in the world. So basically, he is talking about his life and everything that he has experienced or witnessed in his life, and he is turning it into a poem. Basically, his life is like a poem that covers every aspect of our society. He said, go to page number 122. He said, I have been working on it for more than 5 years now. I will finish it in about 22 years from now. That is, if I keep on writing at the present rate. So the poet believes that he has to take another 22 years. You does write a lot then? He said, not anymore. I just write one line a month, but I make sure it is a good line. I asked what was last month's good line. He looked up at the sky and said, the past is deep. I said, it is a beautiful line. B. Wordsworth said, I hope to distill the experiences or to filter the experiences of a whole month into that single line of poetry. So in 22 years, I shall have written a poem that will sing to all humanity. I was filled with wonder. So here B. Wordsworth believes that he will borrow from his experiences and from his observations, and he will pour them down. He will filter his thoughts and his experiences and convert them into great lines of poetry, which will serve the which will serve humanity in future. I was filled with wonder. Our walks continued. We walked along the sea wall at dockside one day, and I said, Mr. Wordsworth, if I drop this pin in the water, you think it will float? He said, this is a strange world. Drop your pin and let us see what will happen. The pin sank. Now, this incident tells us that B. Wordsworth does not believe in theory, he believes in practical applications. Being a poet, he wants to observe things rather than believe on hearsay. He does not want to believe in past theories, but he wants to observe certain things. Also, he says that this is a strange world, which means that B. Wordsworth is not very comfortable with the world. He thinks that the world is strange, the people are strange, and you never know what may or may not happen. But the pin sank. I said, how is the poem this month? But it never told me any other line. He merely said, oh, it comes, it comes. Or we would sit on the sea wall and watch the liners means ships, come into the harbor. But of the greatest poem in the world, I heard no more. I felt he was growing older. How you does live, Mr. Wordsworth? I asked him one day. He said, you mean how I get money? So you can see the boy is curious as to how does the poet make money. Because right now the boy is not a full grown poet, he is in between. Like the boy's mother represents the face of reality. B. Wordsworth represents the face of an ideal poet. Okay, the mother is at one end and B. Wordsworth is at the other end of a spectrum, and the boy is in between. The boy is influenced both by his mother and by B. Wordsworth. When the boy is at his home, or when the boy was growing up in the company of his mother in Miguel Street, he has observed reality. He understands the hardships of their life, the financial hardships, the economic hardships of a town that has been ravaged by war. But being with B. Wordsworth, he is also getting inclined towards poetic sentiments. So he is the mediator in the story. The boy is in between. He is neither here nor there. When I nodded, go to page number 123. When I nodded, he laughed in a crooked way. He said, I sing calypsos in the calypso season, and that lasts you the rest of the year. It is enough. So B. Wordsworth says कि मेरे लिए enough है, मुझे और ज़्यादा कुछ नहीं चाहिए. What I earn, I feed myself with that. So B. Wordsworth does not believe in accumulating money. When the boy says, But you will be the richest man in the world when you write the greatest poem. So the boy is asking this. The boy is concerned about the well being of the poet. He did not reply. One day, when I went to see him in his little house, I found him lying on his little bed. He looked so old and so weak that I found myself wanting to cry. He said, "The poem is not going well." He wasn't looking at me. He was looking through the window at the coconut tree, and he was speaking as though I wasn't there. He said, "When I was 20, I felt the power within myself. Then, almost in front of my eyes, I could see his face growing older and more tired." He said, "But that was a long time ago." Now, suddenly, the poet realizes that he is no longer young. He is no longer 20. He is old, and he is getting older and lonelier. And suddenly, the poet realizes, B. Wordsworth realizes, that he is fighting a lost battle. He realizes कि ये war वो जीत नहीं सकता. Society and capitalism, they will defeat him. It is, the theme here is similar to what we find in the story Quality, where Mr. Jesler, he tried to fight on, he tried to stick to his ideologies, to his beliefs, to his principles, that he will never cheat, he will never uh, betray the trust of the customer, he will never compromise on quality, or he will never go after money. But in the end, the Jesler brothers realize that they cannot win this war. Capitalism will swallow them and they will die. In the same light, B. Wordsworth here also understands that he does not have the stamina and the vigor B realizes that he does not have the stamina and the vigor, the you know, he does not have uh, the enthusiasm or the spirit to wage this war any longer. So he tells Sonny that I was 20, but now I am old, and I feel that it was a long time back that I was 20. So he is physically, but more than that, he is mentally tired. And then I felt it so keenly, it was as though I had been slapped by my mother. I could see it clearly on his face. It was there for everyone to see, death on the shrinking face. He looked at me and saw my tears and sat up. He said, "Come." I went and sat on his knees. He looked into my eyes and he said, "Oh, you can see it too? I always knew you had the poet's eye." Uh, so here B. Wordsworth is trying to say that you had the eye of a poet. So you can see the future. You can see that I am going to die. He didn't even look sad, and that made me burst out crying loudly. He pulled me to his he pulled me to his thin chest and said, "Do you want me to tell you a funny story?" And he smiled encouragingly at me, but I couldn't reply. Go to page number 124. Page number 124. He said, "When I have finished this story, I want you to promise that you will go away and never come back to see me. Do you promise?" I nodded. He said, "Good. Well, listen. That story I told you about the boy poet and the girl poet, do you remember that? That wasn't true. It was something I just made up. All this talk about poetry and the greatest poem in the world, that wasn't true either. Isn't that the funniest thing you have heard? But his voice broke, which means he got emotional. He sort of half cried. I left the house and ran home crying like a poet for everything I saw. Right on the next question. Why does B. Wordsworth, why does B. Wordsworth tell the boy, why does B. Wordsworth tell the boy that, why does B. Wordsworth tell the boy that everything he had said so far wasn't true? That everything he had said so far wasn't true. Okay, 3 marks, 3 to 4. So here you will write down that B. Wordsworth, towards the later part of his life, B. Wordsworth realized that he realized that he was fighting a lost battle. B. Wordsworth realized that in this world of harsh reality and capitalism, his poetic sentiments and idealism cannot win. He also foresaw, Foresaw, he also foresaw his own death and did not want the boy to suffer the same fate. He did not, having got attached to the boy, he did not want the boy to suffer from the poet's tragedy. So he falsified his own statements, Falsified. So he falsified his own statements and told the boy to forget everything as it was a lie. It was his way to try to save the boy's life and to stop himself from turning a poet. This itself tells us about the sad chapter. This itself tells us about the uh, tragedy of being a poet. ओके, ये आंसर लिखना। मतलब पोएट का ट्रेजेडी इतना बड़ा है कि वो खुद ही नहीं चाहता कि कोई और पोएट बने, हालांकि उसे पता है कि पोएट ही सबसे बड़ा इंसान है। पोएट इज द ग्रेटेस्ट पर्सन ऑन अर्थ, but his tragedy is so deep and so profound that he does not want a loved one to be a poet. Okay, go back to the book. I walked along Alberto Street a year later. So 1 year later, the boy was passing by that side, but I could find no sign of the poet's house. It hadn't vanished just like that. It had been pulled down and a big 2-storied building had taken its place. The mango tree and the plum tree and the coconut tree had all been cut down, and there was brick and concrete everywhere. It was as though B. Wordsworth had never existed. So in the last paragraph, the boy realizes that the capitalists, they have erased every bit of the poet from there. Capitalism took over, and his small hut and his beautiful garden, they were eliminated, they were removed from earth. In its place, a new posh building came up. All the trees had been cut down. There was brick and concrete everywhere. So every bit of, or every trace of that poet was removed. It is as if our modern world or our capitalist society is bent upon trying to erase every bit of poetic sentiment from earth. That is what happened in Alberto Street. Full stop. We end the chapter here.